thank you so much for joining me. I am here today with Moira Dory and James Tanner. So excited to be talking all things energy efficiency. Now, I'll leave the introductions to these incredible experts to kickstart us off with, but it's absolutely worth mentioning that both James and Moira have been huge advocates of sustainability for a good number of years now, so wealth of experience and knowledge to share, as well as being landlords themselves. So we'll start with Moira. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are as a Platinum franchise partner, but also in terms of your journey on sustainability?
Okay, so Moira Dory, I am an energy assessor for commercial buildings in my day job. I work for Oxford Brookes University and mainly working with SMEs. That comes from a background of studying environmental management and technology at master's level as a mature student. And I did that because I woke up 20 years ago to the fact that we really need to address climate change, and that's what took me on this journey. So mainly working with commercial buildings, but I became a Platinum franchise partner about 6 years ago, and have during that time obviously been extremely conscious of energy efficiency because of my job. That's what I wanted to bring into the franchise as well, to my own houses, of which we have, my husband and I have 5 houses now. And the sort of consciousness that we are so privileged as landlords to have this chance when you're doing massive refurbishment to really grasp energy efficiency. And so that's where I'm at.
Beautifully said, Moira. Thank you so much. And James, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
I'm a full-time professional landlord. I set up a family landlord business 14 years ago. We have 17 properties in the business. I'm also a developer, and I'm training to be a domestic energy assessor. I actually teach sustainability to primary school kids as well. And we recently set up an energy efficiency consultancy business specifically for HMOs based on the last 14 years experience of what we've actually done that actually works.
Fabulous. So that leads me right on to my first question for you both. With this amount of experience that you have, particularly with HMOs, what would you say has been the most effective measure that you've introduced, maybe into all of your properties or just one of them? And feel free to interpret effective as you like, maybe effective in terms of energy efficiency, maybe effective in terms of cost effective. James, why don't you kickstart us off with that one?
I think the starting point for us was to put in the most energy efficient boiler we possibly could, and some very, very good controls. That's really the key thing for us, to then sort of monitor the usage on an ongoing basis, and to lock up the control cupboard. So whilst the tenants can control the heating in their room, just allows us to sort of manage the heating in the building when it's needed and when it's not needed.
What do you think of that, Moira? Is that something you've incorporated as well? Would that fall in your list?
So starting at the refurbishment stage, certainly maximising insulation as much as possible. Interestingly, for energy efficiency, a semi-detached house, for instance, is actually more energy efficient than the detached house. We have, one of our properties is a detached bungalow. So that's got 4 open sides, built in the 1930s, not easy to do external wall insulation, didn't do internal wall insulation. It does have an EPC rating of C, but it does use considerably more heating than others. And the solution to that now that the building is up and running, is that we would have to put a whole wrap around the whole building, and I think we're not going to do that. However, once the refurbishment is done, absolutely with James, yeah, about heating and controls and being really careful of that. Yeah,
I think insulation is crucial. I think Maura's made a really good point there. I mean, to insulate a building is a very important thing to do as well. We actually have another building which we fully insulated, and as well as put the heating and controls in, and our bills went down over 60%. So you're right, Maura, that's the very, very important thing that all landlords should consider to make their HMOs more energy efficient.
Absolutely right. I think both of you are really touching on the fabric first approach there, which is absolutely thinking about your heating systems. Your smart tech is really, really vital, actually, particularly with bringing down consumption and usage. But first and foremost, looking at your actual building, where are you losing heat? I think a lot of landlords might be watching and thinking, which step do I begin with? And usually it's the simplest, which is just diagnose the house, really assess the house. James and I did a site visit recently where we were looking at that sort of thing. So, you know, look at the doors, look at the windows, look at the roof. Where are you losing the most heat before you start strategizing in terms of heat loss and energy efficiency? So
So just one thing to add there, Massa. One simple thing is about the heat loss. In our house, we noticed that all the houses on the street, they have a half a centimetre gap between the bottom of the door and the ground. So when the heating's on, it's just literally going out into the
right out,
wasting all this heat. You just put a little brush down there. You can get £5 from B&Q and stop that. You know. Sorry.
So one of the ways to check your insulation is using a thermal imaging camera, and you kind of you have to sort of know how to use it a little bit, or really read the instructions. But there are really quite a lot of volunteer groups out there now all around the country, or the councils that have thermal imaging cameras that you can borrow. And as long as you read the instructions, so don't see that your windows, because it reflects off windows, for example, and that doesn't give an accurate reading. But what James is saying, for picking up where drafts are coming in, for instance, thermal imaging is great for that. Or if you think you don't know if you've got cavity wall insulation, again, thermal imaging will pick that up, and very quickly also pick up in your loft, for instance. Yeah, you think, I've got loft insulation, I've done that, but there may be patches that are not covered, at which point it's a chimney. The heat just goes out those uncovered patches in your ceiling. So if people can get hold of a thermal imaging camera, it's quite an interesting one to use.
And Moira, that's a brilliant idea, actually, because even if a landlord puts some measures in to draft proof and do a little bit of insulation, the thermal imaging camera is like a bit like an audit. It will sort of show you, you know, where, if there's any glitches in it or where it hasn't been done correctly. So it's an excellent idea. Excellent idea.
Already kicking off with some sound advice. I'm loving it. Absolutely. So definitely do see if you can get hold of one of those cameras and actually identify the key heat loss points of your properties. But thinking about the fact that both of you have been looking at these things for so long, I'd be interested to know what your reaction was, particularly with everything that's been going on in the news surrounding energy efficiency. It's not just kind of the rise of bills. Of course, we've seen building regulation changes, a lot more clamping down on this push towards net zero. Some people agree with the way it's happening, some people don't. But what was your initial reaction, particularly to the bills? And then has that changed really since the news broke and we've had so many different updates, a new prime minister, a prime minister who's resigned, different policies, and of course other costs that landlords are really worried about, like mortgage rates and everything else. Moira, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, shocked as any landlord was that how the prices were heading. Lots and lots of discussions with that, looking at alternative providers at the time. And then the energy price guarantee came in, and we all went, oh, good, what a relief. And a couple of days ago, that rug is shaking again, doesn't it? That it'll see us through the winter, but we don't know what's happening in April. And I think as landlords and as HMO landlords, we go into this business to make a profit, and it is going to eat into our profits. But I'm really concerned about the fact that some HMO landlords will just really screw down on the heating, and I don't think in any way that's either James or the PPP people, but I think there could be some really distressed tenants in these situations. And obviously the other side of that is fuel poverty is going to be massive. That's not so much for HMO landlords, but it will really affect some vulnerable people.
Can I just add to that? I think that it's really a sort of encouragement to HMO landlords to actually really go for renewables and go for as much energy efficiency as they possibly can. I mean, with PV panels today, HMO landlords can have free electricity and the return on investment is within a few years. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, really, to do those things, as well as make your buildings as energy efficient as you possibly can. And also to educate your tenants about the sort of things that they can do to be more careful. Like, for example, some tenants leave the windows open with the heating on, some tenants go out and leave the lights on, the computers and TVs on, and all those kind of things. So if the landlords could actually educate their tenants and actually get a behavior change in their tenants, the whole thing could sort of shift. It could sort of change.
Absolutely right. And I think that brings us to, you know, this idea of what is energy efficiency. We kind of throw these terms around quite a lot, don't we? But I think, Moira, to your point about it's not a case of just, you know, getting stricter with energy use and kind of stopping supply altogether. It's actually trying to make these buildings more efficient in the way that they are able to hold heat and require less energy, and kind of that win-win-win scenario across the board, ideally. But you know, bringing me on to my next question, I think it'd be interesting to hear from both of you as landlords as to what kind of incentivization people need to actually make these steps. We're definitely seeing a bit of a stick approach, which is if you don't start introducing these measures, you're going to, you know, potentially face compliance issues when it comes to EPC ratings and, you know, building regs we touched on, and of course the bills element as well. But what would your ideal scenario be that would actually help support landlords and property owners more broadly into actually helping improve our building stock in this country? Moira, do you want to start?
Sure. Just on the energy efficiency and what it means, what I say to my commercial customers is using energy is not bad. We need energy to run our country, to run our computers. It's wasting energy that we're looking at. And bearing that in mind always, it's absolutely this. We use energy to heat the buildings so we're comfortable and healthy. We waste energy when we don't turn down the TRV but open the window or leave the lights on when we're not in. Yeah, absolutely right. So yeah, in terms of the question of incentives, certainly an incentive is that the prices are going up, and that's a strange but true thing, that this is absolutely waking people up to energy efficiency and renewables. I'm with James on that. I continue to believe that some sort of financial incentive to get people to move forward on this would be really helpful. I've been running a program recently with the SMEs where we've been offering a 25% grant funding. And it just makes people take action. It really does. Not least if you say this is available for a limited period of time. and they just feel like it's not quite so scary when you've got 25% grant. Maybe a little bit of a dream, but I would love to see that. On the renewable side, I think if you think back to LEDs, when they first came in, yeah, they weren't as great, but also people were like, oh, don't like LEDs, funny light. It's the same light we've got now, really. No, they don't work. They blow, all that. And now, yes, the technology is better, but everybody accepts LEDs. So air source heat pumps are going through that sort of evolution at the moment, I would say. And yes, the government is offering the £5,000 incentive to change your boiler. But air source heat pumps are quite expensive at the moment, and people are scared of them still. And I think that if the government really pumped some money into heat pumps, more than £5,000 over the next couple of years, it might, confidence might be improved on heat pump technology. And that's not a huge economic saving, to be honest, but the carbon saving is very good from heat pumps.
I think one of the fundamental things which really needs to be expanded upon dramatically is for landlords and tenants and homeowners actually to really understand why it's important, why we need to live more sustainably, why we need to have more sustainable homes, why we need to consume less energy and burn fossil fuels, and the damage it's causing to to the world, actually. I mean, global warming is a major problem now, and 25% of the problem is caused from buildings, which is mainly heating and hot water. So on a slightly different level, it's important from that perspective. And I think the number one driver to motivate landlords to actually do it is financial incentives. In Scotland today, they've already got grants and loans of up to £17,500 per property, which is a mixture of grants and interest-free loans to help homeowners and landlords on this journey, because we need to decarbonize all our homes. The government have said that by 2050, we have to be at net zero. The only way that's going to happen is every single property, whether it's a social housing, whether it's someone's home or landlord property, they're all going to have to be a minimum of B, if not A. We've got 28 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think the key takeaways from both of you are financial incentive, but also bigger picture education. I think it's really important on any level for a business or an individual to understand the why. And I think at the moment, for those who might be missing those kind of connected dots, it feels somewhat arbitrary and confusing at times, and really it's just the key thing I would say to take away is that this is the direction of travel. It's not going anywhere. Obviously we've had concerns around energy costs, and that's absolutely true, but I think almost irrespective of that, we were always going to see this clamp down, as James rightly said, this obligation to net zero by 2050. Whether or not we get there is most definitely to be seen. But I think, yeah, well, but I think it's really important to recognize that that is the roadmap. So it's a question for any business or landlord as to where you want to be on that timeline. Do you want to be thinking about all of this quite seriously now and taking those measures, as Moira said, particularly in the refurbishment phase where it's the easiest to do that? Or do you want to wait to be later down the line? Unfortunately, probably with quite a lot of other landlords and property owners who might be struggling at that point. So really worthwhile thinking about quite seriously. And probably my favorite question I have for you both today is, with all of that in mind, where do you see the future of HMOs? We're looking at a predominantly all-inclusive model that is, incredibly robust. It's very clear that this housing choice is very much necessary. It provides great affordable housing choice, and as Moira knows, when it's kind of done properly to the platinum standard, this level of high quality housing, particularly in kind of urban hub areas, city centres, but also kind of further outside as well, we've seen it works perfectly. It's absolutely great for the occupant, but where does that leave kind of landlords who are really looking at this all-inclusive potential model? So I'll start with James, if that's all right for you to give us your views there.
I've had a long chat with the National Landlords Association about this, and what they're recommending is a fair use energy policy which goes into the tenancy agreement at the beginning. So you sit down with the tenants and you offer them a certain amount of gas and electricity kilowatts free, and over and above that they have to pay for their excess. I'm sure tenants won't have a problem with that. I mean, some people, for example, are working at home full time with lots and lots of devices on, so it's their office as well as their home. I'm sure they won't have a problem with that. I think it makes perfect sense.
Interesting.
So James, can I just ask how does that work when there's communal areas and individual rooms?
Well, the thing is to sit down with all the tenants and explain all this to them carefully, and explain why the landlord's doing this. I mean, otherwise, if that doesn't happen, I'm also a landlord, so if it doesn't happen in that way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the rents up. So the tenants have to sort of buy into this. It's like a two-way thing. Everyone's got to sort of muck in together and understand the landlords need to make a profit, the tenants need somewhere to live, but it's sort of got to make sense for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if everyone's got very clear goals, and you could even, for example, a landlord could even install an energy monitor with an app, so that everyone can see exactly how much electricity you're using at any one time. If they put the dryer on, if they put the washing machine on, or the dishwasher, or even the kettle, anyone can see, whether they're in the property or not, exactly how much electricity they're consuming. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I love the idea, and I have thought about that. I'm just struggle to see how, in practice, you would get the tenants who don't know each other or sometimes the new tenants are, for us in Oxford, maybe with pretty high turnaround, 6, 12, 18 months is very common in Oxford for turnaround of tenants, and how they would agree that one tenant wasn't hogging, wasn't using the tumble dryer too often and messing up the bills for everybody else.
Well, it needs to be behavior change. Everyone needs to understand why they're doing this, why it's important from a financial point of view, from a saving the planet point of view, from a global warming point of view, and sort of come together on this and have clear targets every month so everyone knows what the objective is, monitor it very carefully, and everyone's come together to make it a reality. If people really want to do this, they will. If they're motivated to do it, I genuinely believe they will, if everyone's doing this together with a very clear goal.
So at the end of the month, they potentially would get charged £20 each or something.
Well, depends where they got to. Depends if they were under, if they were over, whatever the budget was. Could be. Actually, it could be a rebate to them. In fact, if it was a rebate or excess, you watch this space. They change just like that. You say, I'm going to give you rent. I'm going to give you money back off your rent. I guarantee you, everyone will change the same day. Guaranteed.
Mm. So Moira, what would your potential solution be? Thinking about it in terms of your own portfolio and how you might be approaching the next couple of years, what kind of strategies have you been thinking about, Moira? So
yeah, I was agonizing over what James is saying, which is why I'm really interested. But if I'm interested, then others will be as well listening to this. I hadn't gone quite so blue sky as that, so I'm more on, I haven't got Tim's machines, maybe I should put those in. When we do room checks, and being really fierce about extras, those, I mean, plug-in heaters are one thing, 3D printers, for instance, haven't found one of those yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's one of those in there. All the extras that they add on over and above, and highlighting that to them and saying this, I'm sorry, but this is not what we do here. When I have added extra heaters, for instance, that's under my rules. So if there's a particular reason they need some extra heating, I bring it in, I take it away again as soon as the weather gets warmer. And then sometimes that works. And also working from home. I mean, we really think twice at the moment because it's quite a buoyant market. When people say they're going to be working from home, think, I don't think we want you really.
No, but I think you're both articulating some very real concerns for landlords, again, who are looking at this all-inclusive model. And, you know, James was touching on behavior, where you're not accountable to the amount of energy that you use. It's relatively easy to be quite not as conscious of that as you might be if you were. But there's this tension, isn't there, between providing this premium service, you know, this particularly the kind of HMOs we do at Platinum, versus trying to think about how you might be able to incentivize less consumption in the sense of waste rather than necessity. So I think it's very much going to be a question of watching how the market evolves. We have this degree of certainty for now about where the bills are going, but I think it will probably be an ongoing debate. I think just before we close up, I wanted to ask one final question to you both, which is for the people watching today who want to go away with an action. They absolutely loved everything that you both said. They got some key nuggets, maybe are walking away with some questions. If they could do one thing, what would you both recommend that they do? Starting with you, James.
I think that landlords, HMO landlords, should implement all the no-cost and low-cost measures straight away and install solar PV panels to have free electricity.
Okay, that was a couple of things, James, but
Sorry.
That's all right. Moira, what would be your one key action?
Well, I'm actually cycling right back to the beginning to what James said at the beginning, which is about heating controls. I think people underestimate how much of those bills are heating, and it is low cost, no cost. There's two parts of that. There's making sure that you're controlling the heating, not them, keeping an eye on that, because the tenants do love to turn up that thermostat, and an education of the tenants about heating. Turn down the TRVs before you open the windows. But I love the idea of what James is saying, is make sure you tie that in with, this isn't just money for us, this is for the planet.
Absolutely. I think the key thing to take away, obviously there's a lot going on in the immediate, but this is going to be a far longer journey, for better or worse. And I think those in the property sector who maybe historically didn't care as much about kind of sustainability or thinking about energy efficiency, this could be a great opportunity, not only just to build resilience in your portfolio, but also make a difference and really push for those targets we absolutely need to see in order to make sure that we all have the resources and get to enjoy the things that we do now for years and generations to come. So thank you both so much for joining us. Thank you, Moira. Thank you, James. And we hope you enjoyed watching this with us. If you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch with Platinum. Otherwise, wishing you all a brilliant day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, bye.